like I need a job. So I'm not sure if you'd hire this guy, but somebody did, so you never know. So let's chat about a few things that I think are important, at least from my years of experience at getting jobs and hiring students as new faculty that I think are going to help you out. Some things to think about when you're on the ever exciting and ever scary job search. So first of all, you need to ask yourself when you're just starting out, or actually any time, but particularly when you're just starting out, do I really expect my dream job right away? Is that something that's real important to me as soon as I get my PhD? Or what about just a pretty good job? Would that be good enough for now? What about any job? If times are tight and there's not a lot of people hiring, then any job might do. So these are the questions you need to ask yourself. This was some advice that I was given when I got out of Indiana University with my PhD. A good friend of mine, Tim Long, who was in the classical studies department, told me, Varnick, bloom where you were planted. And I think that's a good idea. I think regardless of whether your first job is your starter job or your dream job, there's no reason not to do the best, because if you want to stay there, obviously you want to succeed, and if you want to move, you want to succeed. So eventually, I think most of us who want to stay in academia might take the advice of another friend of mine. The best job at a university can be summed up in 2 words, and the answer is full professor. And this was from a friend of mine at Rice University who said this when he was an associate professor, which I always thought was pretty interesting. So what are some components of a dream job? Well, possibly location. You've always wanted to work at a particular school. Maybe it's because of the family or some other things. The prestige of the institution. Years ago, when I was doing my postdoctoral fellowship, a friend of mine asked me, well, where do you want to end up when you finally work, and as opposed to postdoc when you're not working? And I thought a minute, and I'm one of these people that doesn't really have a lot of preconceived notions about what he's going to be. And so I didn't think about it too much, but on the spot I said, eventually I want to be a full professor at a Big Ten university, and I guess I am. So maybe there is something to do with that. What about the expectations? Not all jobs are alike. Not all people have the same skill sets. Not all people want to do the same things for the rest of their lives in academia. So you really have to know the expectations of the university and match them well with your own expectations. And if you want to succeed, whatever that means, and advance, whatever that means, you have to weigh that with the kind of job you're going to apply for. And is money an issue? I'm one of these people that happens to believe that jobs in academia aren't really jobs. They're fun. And they actually pay us to do it. Now, sometimes, don't trust me, sometimes I go home and say I earned every nickel today. But most of the time, it's just amazing, the opportunities in academics, and they actually pay you and pretty well for it. So these are all things you need to take into account. Well, when you're looking for jobs, I think one of the things you have to have some sort of a handle on is the different university classifications, because that'll help you decide what kind of institution you want to be, where you want to be, and the kind of institution you're applying to, what their expectations might be. Now, these change a little bit. This is from the Carnegie Institute, and the numbers and the wording changes a little bit, but Research 1 universities, which are doctoral institutions, and if most of you who are listening to this are in PhD programs, that's where you're in school right now. So that's one type of school. There are other types that are primarily master's institution. That is, they may have 1 or 2 doctoral programs at their school. They may not have any, but their highest degree would be a master's degree. That's a different type of a classification. There might be some institutions that really don't have a master's degree, and they're baccalaureate institutions. In addition, there could be associate institutions, and some of them have ranks. In other words, community college, junior colleges, and that's a possibility as well. To give a sense of what we're talking about, if you're in kinesiology, broadly speaking, exercise science, whatever, if you go through the American Kinesiology Association, there's 863 schools that offer kinesiology degrees, and these are all sorts of schools. So there are obviously many, many choices if the type of institution or the classification isn't important to you. However, if you, let's say, want to go to a doctoral institution only, well, there's only about 50 of those. And here is a picture of a few of them. There's certainly not going to be a quiz on these. And probably once I flip through these, you'll see your own school there. So the point is there's students graduating from these institutions here every year. And from these institutions, the graduates go out, and it is very likely, to be honest, in your first job, you're not going to have a job at one of the types of institutions where you came from. You might be at one of the other 863. So that's why you need to know the difference. So you're looking for a job. What kind of things do you need? Well, certainly you have to have your curriculum vitae, and you have to have it current. And things get away from you out here. I recommend, I mean, it's so easy now with electronic that every time you do something worth reporting, you put it on your CV, because that's really important. Sometimes you need to get this out really quickly. So also you have to have a teaching philosophy. I don't care what kind of a university it is. The important thing is that people want you to be able to teach, and they want you to be able to talk about your teaching. So you have a teaching philosophy that's well thought out, that's written, and that you can talk about easily. There might be transcripts, there might be grades that are important for some institutions. Remember, this is your first job, so it's very possible that you're going to have to send transcripts, so you need to have some available. Now, as far as a letter of interest, these are going to be specific to every job, and I would strongly suggest you do not have just a generic one, because, believe it or not, some people actually read these who are on the search committees, and if it looks like a generic letter, then it will be viewed that way, and that's not going to win you any points. So you might think, well, this is a pain to write it specifically to whatever the university is, but this is your career you're talking about, and you need to be as specific as possible. And I'll get into that a little bit more. So with job postings themselves, sometimes they're a little bit tricky. I've always believed that, I mean, it's one of those kitchen sink things that when you write job descriptions, you want this, you want that, and you need to be able to tell the difference between what is required and what is encouraged and what is recommended. I mean, obviously, employers want you to be able to do everything. Sometimes that's reasonable, sometimes it isn't. I mean, I've been on both ends of these. I've written these, and I've obviously applied for jobs with these. So I'm going to put a couple of these up. These are from last fall, and I got these right out of the Chronicle of Higher Institution. This is a small school, a private school in California, California Lutheran. And if you can't read all of this, there's just a couple of pieces that I want to tell you about. This is not a Research One institution. It's mostly with undergrads. And they talk about candidates should have a demonstrated commitment to teaching, scholarship, and university service. Well, that's pretty generic. Prior experiences in undergraduate teaching and course development are desirable. That's very, very important. And they must be committed to mentoring undergraduate students in research. And to me, that's the key part of this. If you don't want to work with undergraduates, this is not the job for you. This is their primary bread and butter, and they have bright kids that go here. They pay a lot of money, and they're going to want you to get them involved in research. That's a different animal than a PhD student. So you have to understand that, and that's the kind of person you're going to be working with. If that's where you feel your strength is, then you should apply. If it's one of those, well, I can do that if I have to, but I really don't want to, unless this is the last job on earth, I probably wouldn't apply. Here's another school, the University of Illinois, which is a Research One institution with a PhD program, a very highly touted program in the Big Ten. And it talks about successful applicants will be expected to have an active research agenda in an area germane to physical activity and health. That you must have, whatever your research is, must have implications for, broader implications for health. So they say all relevant areas of scholarship. So what that means is they're looking for the best athlete, so to speak, but somebody with a research agenda. Later on, if you read the fine print, again, I don't know how well you can see this, but if you can't, in the second paragraph, the successful candidate will be expected to develop and maintain an externally funded research agenda. Well, that hits you between the eyes. If you're not up for that, if you don't understand the importance of that at this institution, then you should not apply for this job. This is what is expected. So that's something you need to take into account. And here's one actually in a medical school department at the University of North Texas Health Science Center in Fort Worth, and it's a physiology department. And as opposed to the Illinois job, which was very generic, looking for the best athlete, this is very specific. Capable of directing an independent funded research program related to neuroregulatory systems or cardiovascular sciences. And they're talking about what is going on at the university. They say applicants with interest in regulation of water and electrolyte homeostasis or regulation of feeding and metabolism are particularly encouraged to apply. So this is very, very specific, and it might be so specific that you would suspect that perhaps it's rigged for somebody. Well, perhaps it is. But if you feel you can do this, and if you feel that that's your expertise, then I think that would be fine. So those are three different kinds of jobs, and you have to read them carefully. So these days, you don't just send in an application and somebody fly you in. In almost all cases that I know about anymore, there's going to be some sort of pre-campus screening, some sort of interviews. It's either going to be a phone interview or more likely in this day and age a Skype interview where you're actually seeing them and they're seeing you. And these are incredibly important. So I'll just tell you some questions that we might ask at Michigan State. We actually did ask a couple of years ago. First question on a Skype interview, well, why did you apply here? And you need to have an answer for that. And you have to say, what are the strengths? You know, what is it you're bringing to us? What are you bringing to this department? What are you bringing to this university? And then we tell you a little bit about ourselves and the fact that our department is in a college of education. Well, that's important because some kinesiology departments are not in colleges of education. They might be in a college of an allied health or some sort of a health sciences college with different missions. And that might give you a sense of what kind of a kinesiology department it is. So when you realize that it's in a college of education, you better have a good answer for that, and you better be able to deal with the fact that it is in a college of education. Some other questions, looking at primary short and long-term goals. And this is where we would say something about, for what you know about the Michigan State University infrastructure, how do you see this facilitating your research efforts? And you might say, well, that's not a fair question. I'm not there yet. Well, in 2012 and beyond, this is a fair question. There's no reason, and I'll say this later, there's no reason why you don't know everything about that university within reason. You should know the collaborators. You should know the other departments. You should know an awful lot about it. Because what that tells me, if I'm on the search committee at MSU, is you really care about this particular job. That's what this question is for. And then obviously you better have an answer. You're not going to walk in the door and say, well, I don't need anything. I can use whatever you've got here. I probably wouldn't hire somebody like that because you're not thinking very far. You're too passive. You're, if nothing else, equipment you might ask for and want within reason would help the department in general. So you need to have some answers here. You need to have thought this out. So a couple other ones. What are the teaching strengths? What about teaching undergraduates? Can you deal with teaching undergraduate? Can you advise master's students? So what are some of the things that you should be asking, right? This goes two ways. Well, first of all, you ought to know a whole lot about the university and the program. and you're not going to be able to know everything not being there. So with your sleuthing around the web page and talking to people, there are going to be some very legitimate questions that you're going to come up with. This is a perfect time to ask them, because what it tells me is that you've looked at our university, you couldn't possibly know the answer to this, and this is relevant. So those are the kinds of questions you need to ask. Don't just BS. What is important to you? Remember, you're interviewing, it's a two-way street. And maybe you don't feel that way if you're trying to get your first job, but it is a two-way street. And you're going to be there for a while, maybe short-term, maybe forever. And it has to be a good fit. So clearly, you're going to want to ask some things about teaching, about research, about service and outreach, because those are the three areas where you're going to be judged and you're going to be spending your time. So a couple of questions. This is certainly not an all-inclusive list. What is the teaching load? That's a very obvious but important question. At a university like Michigan State, a typical teaching load is 2 classes per semester during the academic year. At a smaller school where research is not emphasized as much, it could be as many as 4 classes per semester. So you need to know this sort of thing up front, and you need to make sure that that coincides with your particular goals. Are all the classes already done, or do you see yourself as being able to add your particular strength, not only in form of research, but in teaching new classes? Is it something you're allowed to do? Is it something you're expected to do? That's good to know. Some people like to teach in the summer. They need the money, or they just like to teach. Some people don't. Are there at least opportunities to do so? That's something worth checking out. A few questions related to research. Getting back to that Illinois job, what everybody's going to say, yeah, it would be nice to get funding, even at a smaller school. But the way they say it is going to tell you how important it is. Is it the kind of thing that if you don't bring a externally funded $3 million grant in by 3 years, you're out of here? That's totally different than, if you bring in any sort of external money, you're going to probably go up early for tenure. So it's a different philosophy. It's a different mission of the university. When you go up when you're evaluated annually, when you go up for tenure at some point, what counts to publish things? Or do they all have to be in peer-reviewed journals? Do more lay press articles mean something at this university? What about books? What about book chapters? You might not be able to get all the answers, but you should get a sense of what's important. If this is a research one kind of institution, well, are there startup fundings available? Do you have some things for lab equipment and possibly a graduate assistant to work with you? Is there some sort of an internal grant program, at least to get your research off the ground? Assuming, again, I'm assuming with all of this that you're fresh out of the box, PhD, that you cannot bring research money with you. That's sort of the assumption of this webinar. In terms of service and outreach, this depends on the type of university. And service can be internal or external. Internal service includes committee expectations. These are the kinds of committees that run the department, like curriculum committees, etc. It also could be students' master's thesis committees. Do you have to be on every master's thesis committee in the department? Those can be very time-consuming. What about service to the department, those types of committees, versus the college versus the university? What are those sort of expectations, and how might they be divided? What about the community? Some universities have a very strong community service and outreach ethic. Michigan State University is a land-grant university, so we have quite a bit of our mission deals with outreach. Doesn't mean you can't do research with that, but that's an important component. So it's something you need to think about, and it's something you need to learn when you talk to the folks at wherever you're applying. And just a few general questions, again, in no particular order. Is there some sort of a mentoring program, either informal or formal? When I got my first job, I met a few people that were very instrumental in my career, but there was nothing formal. That's the way I like things. They just sort of work out. I mean, it sort of seeks its own level. Other places have very strict, you're set up with a mentor and all sorts of things, and some people like that. My point is just find out what it is, and then you know if you like it or not. At some universities, you can be promoted before you're tenured, and in some universities, you can be tenured before you're promoted. In some universities, the two are linked together. Without giving my opinion on that, all I can say is that it's different, and it may affect how you think about the university. Fringe benefits, that's something a lot of people don't ask about. Perhaps you ask about it a little bit more if you're married and have a couple of kids. But this is not trivial, and it's something you need to check out. My university, the fringe benefits are very, very good. And when you add the salary plus the fringe packet, when they evaluate different universities with compensation, relative to other schools in the Big Ten, we do very much better than if we just look at the salary alone. So health insurance and things like that, retirement, those are important things to get a handle on. How does your department work? Is there a faculty advisory committee? Is it a benign dictator, the chair? Is it a shared kind of a governance thing? This is important to some folks. At some universities, particularly those that are Research 1, you have to earn what we call graduate faculty status. What I mean by that is if you want to work with particularly doctoral students, you have to sort of show that you have the ability to do that, and you have to prove that to your university rather than just walking in the door and being eligible. Different schools have different philosophies about this. I don't know that one is right and one is wrong. They're just different, and you need to find out how it works at your particular place. And something like meetings. You're supposed to go present your research at meetings, particularly if it's a Research 1 university. Well, are you going to give me any money to travel? So these things all sort of add up, and you sort of keep your score sheet, and when you're making decisions about a university, if you want to continue with your application and your interview process. And then the question, how much does a job pay? And what I think about that at this point is don't ask the question. If you ask the question early in the game, you've just shot any goodwill that you've developed. You don't need to ask it at this point. It will come up in due time. So how do you find out? Is it not important? No, I'm not trying to minimize the importance of it, but it's not a question you have to ask. Just like where the different kinesiology departments are, you can go online and get a very good estimate. For instance, here's some schools. I know there's a lot of them here, so don't get too carried away and all worried about all the numbers. But I'll move my little cursor here. I think you can see it. And let's just take a school. I have a friend who teaches at Albion, and these are a couple years old. And if you look at an assistant professor, it says average annual salary and academic rank. So if you look at the average assistant professor, this is a few years ago at Albion, it's around $52,000. Well, consider average is probably somebody that's been in there about 3 years, right? Because most people are assistant professors about 6 years. So I would assume that this is somebody who's been there 3 years. All right? As opposed to Eastern Michigan University, which is a MAC level school, using the sports analogy here, where you can see that it's about $9,000 more for the average salary. Well, let's flip to Michigan State University, where the number is around $68,000. So you can see that it goes up as the type of university, the division, the expectations of the university go up. This shouldn't be a huge surprise to you. My point is you can get this information from the website before you go in, so you have a sense of what you should be asking for and what they should be at some point and what they should be offering you at some point when it comes to that. So now you have your on-campus interview. So what's going on with that? Well, first of all, you're going to eat. People like to eat. People love to go meet candidates who are faculty members because they get free breakfast. So don't order too much because all you're going to be doing is eating. And just a small tidbit, if you go out for a meal and they say, do you want a drink? What I would say is no more than one of anything. If you feel like you don't want one at all, nobody's going to be offended, because sometimes that's a sort of a test question. So I think I said enough about that. You're going to meet your committee. you're going to meet administrators, you're going to meet students, you're probably going to give a lecture to students. They might just say, you're going to be here for the 5th week of the semester in our exercise physiology class. This is what we're teaching this week. Here you give the lecture. So there's a lot of different ways that this can be done. Hopefully you'll get to meet the staff. If you don't get to meet them, I would ask to meet them because you're going to be working with them and they can really help you. Make a lot of written and mental notes, right? You've done your homework. You know what the university is like. Some of the questions you could get answered when you did your Skype interview. Some of them need to be answered here. You're also going to be meeting, hopefully, potential collaborators. So remember, you're interviewing them, they're interviewing you. Make your questions very relevant so that they know you're interested and you've done your homework. Just a few other things. How many jobs should you apply for? Well, when I was coming out, I applied for many, and I had a very nice little file of very colorful rejection letters, very humbling. But, well, is this your first job versus your dream job? If you're a little farther along and you can be a little pickier, if you've got a good job right now and don't need to leave it, then maybe you can be pickier. So it depends there. Keep track of where you applied. Keep track of what you sent to who and when you did it, because it can get a little crazy in terms of, particularly if you're a viable candidate and more than one place wants to bring you in. You have to be careful with all of those sorts of things to make sure you keep that all in order. If you don't hear from them after a bit, give them a reasonable amount of time, but you can politely ask them how they're doing. If it's been what you feel or what they've told you is a little bit longer than you should have expected. And this tells you something about the university. I've always felt that schools that don't do a good job of keeping up with the candidates that are applying to them, that tells me something about them as well. So this is good information to have. So with that, I'll just wish you good luck, and hopefully I've brought up a few points that are valuable to you, and I hope you do well with your job search. It's a great field, and you'll love almost every minute of it. Again, good luck and thank you.